who fired the first shot in the sexual revolution? If you've watched my film, The 1916 Project, or you listen to this show, you might be thinking, oh, well, it must have been Alfred Kinsey, right? Or, maybe Havelock Ellis, or, was it Hugh Hefner, or maybe it was Margaret Sanger, or maybe it was one of the early first wave feminists. Is that where it comes from? Is it Betty Friedan? Was it Margaret Mead? No, actually, this goes back a long, long, long way. I mean, I guess you could take it maybe to the Baal statues and the Ashtaroth poles and stuff like that. But in modern memory, I think the answer will actually shock you. We have back on the show today a show favorite, my brother, my mentor, my friend, and guest VIP star in the film The 1916 Project, Dr. George Grant, pastor emeritus of Parish Presbyterian, planter of schools and churches all around the globe, the one, the only, Dr. George Grant. Buckle up. You're in for a treat. And guess what? It's going to make 2024 and 2025 make a lot more sense when you understand where we've come from. Welcome to the Seth Gruber Show. Over 1 million children were killed in 2023 in America.
Children are always the unconsenting subjects of progressive social experiments.
What if the culture war was just a proxy war for the spiritual war? What if Satan masqueraded his demonic assault against the image of God as just a science and just a politics to keep the politically impotent pastors silent?
We live in the culture of death called why is abortion demonic? Because Jesus came for you to have life. The devil came to steal and kill and destroy.
We won't do for good what the other side is so zealously willing to do for wickedness.
Join us at Life or Death Con on January 23rd in Washington, D.C. Head over to lifeordeathcon.com to get tickets today.
It's almost here, guys. Life or Death Con. It is almost here. Okay, you got to get your tickets. They're going fast. We're going to have Ali Bestucky. We're going to have Eric Metaxas. Pastor Gary Hamrick. All right, if you live on the West Coast and you're like, who's that? He's the Jack Hibbs of Virginia, man. All right, this guy's baller. This guy preaches an election sermon every 4 years, about 2 months before the national election. We've got Pastor Landon Schott, Isabel Brown, Dr. George Grant, who's the guest on the show today, Dr. Nancy Piercy. Such an incredible line. Joshua Broom, the former adult entertainer turned pastor and evangelist. Myself. Make sure you grab your ticket at lifeordeathcon.com as we rebuild Christian resistance and get the church back on the front lines against the culture of death. Okay, Dr. George Grant. I just gave you a heck of a bio. Everyone knows how much I love you. But we're starting to work on some more projects together, brother. I'm starting to work on a new kind of film and book. I have a church tour starting in February that deals with a lot of these questions. And we've quoted before Hilaire Belloc, who says to comprehend the history of a thing is to unlock the mysteries of its present, but more to discover the profundities of its future. Where might we go if for modern Christians to maybe begin to understand today's crazy revolution in the 21st century, and then how does that point to what the year 2050 looks like if nothing changes? How would you answer the question? As honestly, I say you're an expert on the sexual revolution. How would you answer the question, who fired the first shot in the sexual revolution?
Well, we could go back all the way to Baal. We could go to Ashtaroth. We could go to Rome under Caligula or Nero.
Yep.
But I think, given the fact that Christianity reshaped that world completely and eradicated the vestiges of all of those pagan, destructive sexual ideologies, the real answer really has to bring us to the French Revolution, sort of the beginning place, the birthplace of the modernist, revolutionary, progressive ideology that has come to dominate our day. And the individual probably most responsible for that sort of radical sexualization of the revolution was a man by the name of Donatin Alphonse Francois de Sade, best known to us as the Marquis de Sade, from whom we get the term sadism.
Right.
He was he was a part of the lower nobility, but in 1787 he published a novella that was really an exploration of his own sexual fantasies and experiences.
Yeah.
The novella
Which is
was
what
called
Kinsey would later do.
exactly.
Write things to explore and justify his own vices.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So this novella was called Justine, and it eventually got him thrown into prison, the big aristocratic prison called the Bastille in Paris.
By his own mother-in-law, if I recall.
Well, she was the one who turned him in, but he was,
Yeah.
according to the courts, he was charged and convicted of indecency, obscenity, pornography, blasphemy, violent assault, what we would call human trafficking today. He was a very, very perverse and wicked character. But as awful as all of those crimes were, they don't even begin to describe the vileness and the destructiveness of this novella, Justine. When he was thrown into the prison at the Bastille, there were only actually 7 prisoners in the Bastille. They were all aristocrats, and they all had very, very comfortable apartments. So, for instance, de Sade actually had a full library in his apartment. So this is not like he's sitting in a cell somewhere, but he is kept away from the public. But of course,
And did that become almost more destructive because rather I'm saying, I guess, in the long-term trajectory of his historical impact? Because instead of just living out weird fantasies and perversions and vices with several women and himself, he becomes a man of letters and captures his ideology that now we say is the first shot of the sexual revolution. Is that right?
That is correct.
But first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company. Okay? If we want to build a good culture for our family and our children, one of the ways that you're going to have to do that, guys, I know this is hard for us, but we have to start shopping in alignment with our values. I get it. There's so many great services, softwares, and companies that are super woke, left, and anti-Christian that are really convenient and nice. Believe me, I get it. But you cannot defeat a culture of death by funding that very same culture of death. That's why we love our friends at Every Life Diaper Company. Did you know almost every major diaper company or baby brand in America rhetorically or financially supports the abortion industry? So the group that sells you baby products is helping reduce the baby population by celebrating killing them. Make it make sense. Get your diapers and your wipes and your now baby shampoos and washes from everylife.com. Use promo code SETH10, SETH10 for 10% off your first order and let them know that we sent you. And then you're supporting the White Rose Resistance and us here at the Seth Gruber Show as well. Everylife.com, promo code SETH10, SETH10. Go support our friends at Every Life Diaper Company and help us defund, bankrupt this culture of death that we're living in today. Thank you, Every Life Diaper Company.
And of course, in the first year of his imprisonment, his wife was able to smuggle into the Bastille a regular array of prostitutes, male and female. And so he's indulging in these, as he sits in prison, thinking through all of his fantasies, he now works them out. And on at least 3 occasions that we know of, the prostitutes that were sent in did not come back out alive.
Oh my
so
gosh.
we're talking about absolute horrific violence, perversion beyond and depravity beyond anything that we can think or imagine. This is not Jeffrey Epstein. This is way worse, way deeper, way weirder than anything like that.
Sadomasochism.
Masochism and sadism. Eventually, the French authorities under the crown realize this is not a healthy situation, and they cut off access. And that's when his depravity goes darker and deeper still. But then in 1789, of course, we have the rumblings and the beginnings of revolution. And it starts, in April under the instigation of the Duc d'Orléans, a rival to the French king, the Bourbons, and a member of the royal family. He lived in a palace, the Palais Royal. It was Richelieu's former palace, now given to the House of Orléans. He turns that into the seedbed for revolutionary thought. So they have pornography palaces, and they have bordellos. They have theaters where radical ideas were portrayed on the stage. They had newspapers publishing radical ideas, calling for revolutionary overthrow of the entire Western structure of civilization. It was the seedbed for anything and everything perverse and wicked. And
But de Sade is still in prison.
De Sade is still in prison. But as people start to take to the streets, de Sade sees that this might be an opportunity for him. And on May the 5th, the first of the assemblies took place at Versailles. By June the 20th, the Estates General have staged the tennis court oath. On July the 2nd, with people taking to the streets, de Sade decides to create a kind of peculiar megaphone that he assembles out of his toilet in his apartment, and begins to shout to the crowd that the people in prison were being tortured by the royal authorities, which of course was not the case. And there were only 7 prisoners anyway. That eventually led on July the 14th to the storming of the Bastille. And de Sade is set free, and he becomes, in a sense, the court jester to the revolution. He doesn't have political power. That's held by the Jacobins, first Marat and then later Robespierre. But he becomes sort of the inspiration because now he can indulge all of his perverse fantasies freely, openly at the Palais Royal. And he becomes a kind of star at the Palais Royal. E. Michael Jones, who has written widely on this subject in 3 different books, said that given the fact that passions drove the revolution, it was not surprising that the first expression of freedom the revolutionaries chose to exercise at the Palais Royal was the freedom from any and all sexual restraint. Nor was it surprising that the sexual passion, freed from all restraint, would quickly degenerate into a passion of a bloodier sort. De Sade, after all, had stretched out the trajectory. So now we've got this kind of Dionysian bacchanal where that spills over into violence and radicalism, looting in the streets of Paris, and eventually, of course, the overthrow of the monarchy and the assassination of the royal family.
Right. So I think one of the themes that I continue to see in history, and that I wanna phrase this question as specifically as I can, Why does sexual revolution or sexual liberation, I mean, the two kind of go together, sexual wildness, unmoored ethics, why do these things always turn violent and result in political revolutions?
Well, in a sense, when you remove all restraint, man becomes what man is innately, depraved. And the idea of dominating another is closely related to sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is the domination of another. Well, if you charge that with political ideology, you start to see the kind of thing that we see in social media all the time of these radical leftists screaming with rage and anger because Donald Trump gets elected, or because someone wears a red hat, for heaven's sakes. So, in a sense, what it is it's the unhinging of all restraint. And because man's natural proclivity is to violate all of the 10 commandments, he goes through them one by one. The rejection of God himself, the rejection of the restraint on behavior. And as we have seen on social media just in the last few days, when a president of a healthcare company is assassinated on the streets of New York, and what does the progressive left do? We're starting to see him lauded as a kind of folk hero. He's been called a modern day Robin Hood. He murdered a man in the middle of New York City. And so what happens with revolution is it unhinges all restraint. Sexual restraint then spills over into violence and anger, and eventually it leads to the tearing down of the foundations of the society itself. France was saved from absolute destruction only by the imposition of the tyranny of Napoleon, which was no great answer, of course. And it led to 15 years of perpetual warfare with the rest of Europe. It's a warning to us that if we continue down this path, the violence and the chaos won't endure for forever. But what comes after the violence and the chaos may be worse than anything that we could think or imagine. I mean, you start to think about what happened when Saddam Hussein was overthrown. Well, Iraq was thrown into absolute chaos. And the only way that Iraq has in any way come to a place of stability is the imposition of a tyrannical, dictatorial government. Same thing has happened in Libya. Gaddafi is overthrown. Then you have absolute chaos for 4 years before a series of warlords divvy up the country and they exercise tyrannical control. Is that what we want?
Right.
Well, that's where we're headed.
Right. So, R.J. Rushdoony said, moral anarchy is always the prelude to statist tyranny. This vaunted freedom from law ends always in a freedom from liberty.
Right.
Ironically, one of the towers and cells that the Marquis de Sade was imprisoned in was called Liberté.
Right.
Just like irony of ironies.
Yeah.
But moral anarchy is always the prelude to statist tyranny. And so if we can reduce people to entertain and indulge their most animalistic sexual urges whenever they have them,
Right.
in a sort
and
of
however they have them.
Exactly. In a sort of John Stuart Mill utilitarianism, or in a sort of Thomas Hobbesian, every man has a right to everything sort of indulgence. Well, those people don't become free; they become slaves. I heard it said that a man has as many masters as he has vices, and so by promoting vice, the regime promotes slavery, which can then be fashioned into a form of political control.
Yeah, G.K.
Is that the
Chesterton.
French Revolution?
Yeah, G.K. Chesterton said, if a man does not believe in the 10 commandments, he will be forced to submit to the 10,000 commandments.
Wow.
That's one of the things that we're dealing with. Ron van Prinsterer, who was the mentor to Abraham Kuyper and one of the most brilliant thinkers on the back end of the French Revolution and the revolutions of 1848, which followed and ushered in, the age of communist revolutions, said, unbelief and revolution unleashed in France unprecedented perversity and destruction. And the reason is simply that revolution and sexual perversity always go hand in hand. Look at the lives, the personal lives of people like Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, Vladimir Lenin, Joseph Stalin. You look at Idi Amin or Colonel Mengistu, or you can look at the Sandinistas or the Castros in Cuba. It's always this perverse Caligula-like existence. So Jean-François Revel, one of the great French thinkers, conservative thinkers of the last generation, said sexual passion and progressive radicalism of the likes of Marquis de Sade and his Jacobin comrades worked together to create a practical blueprint for future radicals, carefully followed right up to this day.
Wow. One of the themes in the French Revolution and with the Marquis de Sade and then the eventual destruction that followed about a year or two after he's released from prison. One of the central themes that we see there and that we see today that I wanted you to speak to was the combination always of sexual revolution and chaos with a mockery of Christianity.
Right.
Always. I mean, even with Margaret Sanger, who said the marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order.
Right.
Alfred Kinsey, the father of the sexual revolution, who said the entire army of religion is our central enemy, end quote. Those always go hand in hand.
Right.
Did we see that in the first sexual revolution and in the French Revolution?
Absolutely. One of the things that the French Revolution attempted to do was round up all of the priests and pastors, Protestants in the South, Roman Catholics in the North, and more than 3,000 were imprisoned. About 2,000 of them were killed by the guillotine, and tens of thousands more were sent into exile. Then they took the churches and they desacralized them. So Notre Dame was turned into the temple of reason, just like Chartres and Reims and all of the great cathedrals. They were desacralized. It wasn't until Napoleon came along and had rapprochement with Rome that the church was allowed back into France after 10 years of revolution. So everybody probably has indelibly etched in their minds the horrific spectacle of Paris's Olympic opening ceremony.
Right.
That was, a lot of Christians picked up on the fact that it was a mockery of the Lord's Supper, but it was way more than that. In the closing ceremonies, they had this demonic figure that hovered over the stadium. All of the imagery from the masked revolutionary run across the rooftops of the city of Paris to Marie Antoinette's severed head singing in the windows along the River Seine, to that Dionysian festival that had people bowing down to a golden calf, and then of course the horrific sexualization of the Last Supper with transgender. Uh, it was just awful. All of that, though, was merely a reportrayal of scenes from Marquis de Sade's novel Justine, and from the Festival of Reason that was held in Notre Dame in 1793.
Wow.
So here we are, 2024. We have artists and dancers and actors and singers from Lady Gaga across the board reportraying this revolutionary tableau as if to say, bring the demons on. We're ready for the revolution again.
Wow. And it feels like that's what we're living through right now. One of the claims of, I guess, our secular overlords or the liberal elite or whatever you want to call them today is that those who oppose drag queen story hour in front of minors are bigoted. Those who oppose the chemical castration of minors through transgender drugs, or eventually actually the sexual mutilation of genitalia of minors
through surgery.
Don't you see, the reason Christians oppose that is because they're hateful, bigoted, and they would rather have those young people kill themselves. They literally make life or death accusations against Christians, and they say, if you don't do these things to minors to support their inward authentic identity, then they will kill themselves. Would you rather have an alive son or a dead daughter? And that death will be at the feet and the hands of the church and of Christians who aren't getting on board with the modern progressive sexual revolution.
And of course, all of that's just propaganda language, because they have no data to back up their assumptions.
That's right.
And in fact, what data does exist contradicts that completely.
Right.
All of the studies that have looked at gender dysphoria have shown that anyone who is not treated well, meaning counseled out of gender dysphoria, is about 70% more likely to commit suicide. That's astonishing. The whole system of the transgender movement is incredibly Marquis de Sade-like destructive.
Right. Well, but it doesn't matter, right? It's not about the data. It's not about whether they're accurate. It's just the imposition of will. Right. As we sort of wrap up, and this would be a fascinating kind of multi-episodic conversation, of course, about the first sexual revolution, if you will. But I think it's clear that the modern left and our culture of death in general today is downstream of the Marquis de Sade and of this sexual chaos. But is the modern left today fascinated by Marquis de Sade? I'm not asking have they been impacted or have they been influenced. I think we've answered that question, and it's a yes. But are they fascinated by him? Are they attracted to him? Do they read Justine? Do they like his ideas? Or is he just a little bit too much?
No. Lord Byron, Mary Wollstonecraft, Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Friedrich Nietzsche, Richard Wagner, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Antonio Gramsci, Emma Goldman, Margaret Sanger, Albert Kinsey, they all read de Sade.
Wow.
Now, the modern revolutionaries, since then, they probably only watch de Sade films. I'm not sure that they read de Sade.
Right.
But yes, it's still a deep fascination, and you start to see it just among the elite. They are, if we want to imagine what on earth is going on in the scandal around hip hop and our greatest rap
Diddy.
moguls with Diddy and all of the rest. Uh, if we can imagine that emerging out of just nowhere, that's absurd. All of this has been modeled, all of this has been emulated, and it
Right.
comes from this revolutionary mindset. It has been nurtured by the Frankfurt School and the Bloomsbury Group, and by the radical romantic poets Shelley, Keats, and Byron, and all of the rest. So it's not unfiltered, de Sade. It's an edifice built upon the foundations that de Sade laid.
Yeah. So, okay. So, last question for you, Dr. Grant, because maybe, maybe I should just be reprimanded and scoffed at for trying to make sense of the left, because I understand what we're dealing with is not a rational movement. But I do have to wonder why the revolutionaries today are fascinated by someone like this when it's very clear in his own writings and in his personal life, in his memoirs, that this is a guy who not only, had a hatred of the female genitalia and preferred sodomy, but this is a guy who believed in the domination of women, and talked about them and treated them as the weaker sex. And I mean that very literally. I don't mean in the way that the Bible talks about the weaker sex. I mean, like, he meant that they should be the slaves of men's appetites and desires
Right.
for his satisfaction. And
It's
I'm like, well,
almost
that
Islamic.
doesn't sound like Me Too.
No.
Why haven't they just, declared de Sade anathema?
Well, I think because it's been institutionalized in their ideology and in their culture, and it's not like anybody's holding up Marquis de Sade, signs. There, we've got Che Guevara T-shirts. We don't have Marquis de Sade T-shirts. Um, so he's not a frontline character. He's this animating influence across time.
Yeah.
And we're much more likely to find our influence from Carl Jung through the teachings of modern psychology, including,
Freud, yeah.
you know, Jordan Peterson, who is a Jungian psychologist. You're much more likely to get that filtered influence of de Sade. But, again, Me Too hasn't gone after Kinsey, hasn't gone after, Hugh Hefner, hasn't really gone after all of the sources of the debauchery. It's much more convenient to go after Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. It's the same reason why they don't like to be confronted by Margaret Sanger's legacy and ideas.
Exactly.
Because they're connected to that. They're downstream from that. They've been
Directly
a part of that.
downstream. Yeah.
Right. And so it's hard to say, well, therefore, let's cancel this person entirely. So, okay. Lastly, then, what should the modern Christian man and Christian woman listening to this and watching what's happening in our culture, how should they then live, and what should they go home and do in light of all this?
Number one, young men, go find the wife of your youth, get married, have babies, build a strong family, enjoy the beauty, goodness, and truth that the Lord has entrusted to you, and be reminded that joy is the greatest weapon against the dour worldview of the progressives. They can't stand it when we laugh. And so take Psalm 2 as your motto, and take the joy of the Lord wherever you go. Secondly, we need to be alert to the signs of destruction all around us, and we need to stop patronizing these institutions of destruction. We need to be looking at alternate media. We need to find alternate entertainment. We need to find alternate companies, small local companies that we can buy from rather than these massive, corporate entities that are out to destroy our way of life. We need to be thinking consciously about and very, very deliberately about the whole of our lives and rebuild Christendom from the ground up.
And young men, put covenant eyes on all your devices and add your mother-in-law to receive your browsing history report. Also that one. or else you're bringing an Asherah de Sade pole into your own home. Actually.
Yeah, it's really important that we stop being peeping Toms, even digitally.
Yep. You want to talk about the vice that's stunting the witness of the church, by the way.
Amen.
Goodness gracious.
Amen.
All right. Well, Dr. Grant, that was incredible. Thank you. The first sexual revolution, the man who fired the first shot. I think it's really important for everyone listening to be people who study and read and understand, because you cannot identify sinister and actually sneaky agendas and the way that some of these things actually unfold themselves into the culture, maybe into a school that you've got your kid at, maybe into a hipster, too tight jeaned youth pastor that's not rightly dividing the word of truth, because a lot of these ideas, they find themselves in so many aspects of our culture, including Christian books. I mean, most of the books on Christian sexuality, Dr. Grant, if you do the citation and then you see what they cited and then what they cited, do you know where you end up back usually? The Kinsey Institute.
Yeah, Kinsey or Johnson & Johnson or,
yep.
Or Masters & Johnson, not Johnson.
Yep. Yep. So just to be clear, guys, this is not like, the pagan world versus the Christian world. It's like, no, a lot of this stuff has found itself everywhere. And we need to be clear.
It's the flesh. It is the flesh. And when you unbridle the flesh, what you wind up with is all of the stuff of the revolution.
Yep. Amen. Be alert, be aware. Listen to this probably 2 or 3 times, guys. Buy books written by Dr. George Grant and devour them. Be a son of Issachar and stand for righteousness, stand for truth, speak the truth. Never seal your lips. Never be a coward. Never let a lie go by unaddressed or unacknowledged or unexposed. Exercise your moral muscles. Love your family. Raise dragon slayers. And as Pastor Douglas Wilson says, then don't complain that there's dragons out there for them to slay. Dr. Grant, thanks for joining us today, brother.
Bless you.
Guys, head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give the show a rating and review. Make sure you subscribe to Dr. George Grant's podcast, okay? You'll find it, Stand Fast Cast, and his ones on the Heroes of Christian Resistance. All right, go follow him, buy his books, and subscribe at Rumble for us, guys, if I'm ever digitally assassinated by YouTube. We would love to see you in Washington, D.C. on January 23rd for Life or Death Con. Go to lifeordeathcon.com to get your tickets, and if you're an ally of the White Rose Resistance at $35 a month or greater, you get a free ticket. All right, just get your airfare, coming out and join us and hear Dr. Grant give a message. Hear Dr. Nancy Piercy and Pastor Gary Hamrick and Eric Metaxas and Ali Bestaki and myself and more. It'll be an incredible time to inspire, mobilize you, and send you back home to be dragon slayers as we begin to seek to abolish abortion in every state in America and give God a reason to show America mercy. Make sure you pick up a book or host a screening of the film The 1916 Project at your church by going to the1916project.com. And very soon, we're going to have an in-depth curriculum series that dives deeper into all the ideas in the 1916 Project with Dr. George Grant and other incredible professional voices. Thank you, guys. And until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.